Okay. You can come up here because I think you'll want to answer your question up here. And then, I can't, is anybody log into the Zoom here? Are they gonna log into the Zoom? I'm thinking we can actually put it up on that screen, but it has to be a separate thing that usually, that way they can see that and then we can see that. If you want to just log into the Zoom, then there's a board here. So I'm trying to. Okay. Well. The truth. Very, very yeah. If you see on that's a location. I understand. Yeah. It's gotta be something. No. I'm just not familiar with the setup, so, hey, Jen. Have you worked with the Board of Ed?
I have not. Just, I know everything.
Anyway, it's a lot.
Yeah, the chance.
Oh, wait, something.
Good.
Okay.
I just got told by John.
No, I'm saying so. It's there's no point on the presentation that Jack was showing. I'm saying you can just connect the screen. So it'll show whatever's on that screen and then we can these go. I thought these were gonna be tethered together.
Okay.
No, Jack. Yeah, unless you'd rather screen share yourself, you can do that, but I'll tell her to take it down.
Okay.
It's not up to you.
Okay.
Yeah, do you want to just use something on that here with the yeah, I was going to share your
Hey, welcome back. How are you saying like going? I know. Just got that.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Where's it going?
Just not picking.
Yeah. Thanks. John, John,
Yeah, I think we did.
That's so hard.
So I get older.
It really is. We've been through it 3 times.
And I will list here as well. This is my first.
Oh,
Salary for years.
my first one. I feel like I'm in the conversation. Something like.
Well,
But then I get over
I should have come down.
Why am I front and center? This is not.
I was sitting with that.
I don't think, no, you're okay. We're okay.
Hey, Bob. How are you?
How are you doing?
Hey, Bob.
He hasn't started sharing it.
I will.
Like Sean, right, his name showing up in that little screenshot.
Can't make this stuff up.
So I'm gonna start us off, okay? All right, thanks.
Yep, I'm gonna, thank you for moving in. Thanks for.
So, many apologies. I just want to welcome everybody here today. I'm First Selectwoman Peggy Lyons. We were just having some technical issues because the setup wasn't quite what we expected. We're going to be showing a presentation and then we have people from home attending via Zoom. So this is a hybrid meeting, so it's a little more complicated sometimes to operate that. So really, this is going to be a meeting, for Eversource is going to give a short presentation on their vegetation management program relating to the transportation or transmission lines. I know a lot of you have questions and had your own personal interactions with Eversource as they've been going through their vegetation management home visits and site visits. But what we'd like to do is let them start this off, give a presentation, and then we would open it up to kind of a Q&A after that. And I just want to also just comment and welcome. We have some other elected officials here. We have State Senator Christine Cohen, who's joined us today. Representative John Michael Parker is here. We also have 2 other Board of Selectmen members, Al Goldberg and Jen Gordon, who have joined us. And then I'll let Eversource introduce their team. I know some of these are familiar faces because you've met them as you've interacted with them. So, so we'd like to just, make this as, I just think as helpful and informative for you. We have a lot of people here, both online and in person, that, so we're gonna have to limit maybe some of the time for different questions, but then they've also committed that if we submit things in writing, you will get a written response afterwards. So if we run out of time with certain questions or you're not quite sure, you'll be receiving an email address to submit. They promised us that they'll respond as much as they can in writing to those questions if we don't get to everything today. I also just want to comment for people online at home. Jacqueline, my assistant, is kind of the host for this. So she'll get to the online attendees as well, and there'll be an opportunity for you to raise your hand online and ask questions also after the presentation. So, so I think he's just trying to locate it. You got, okay, yeah, and this was a little bit on our fault. We were originally going to run it off of Jacqueline, but we couldn't get these 2 to connect, so he's independently connecting to the screen. So at least you guys will have a better view. I'm going to tilt this way so the camera faces. Well, actually, it's covering. It's working okay. Actually, it's showing everything. So I guess
Okay.
I can like that. Yeah, I think it's okay. So we will start. Pardon?
We can start with introductions while.
Okay, yeah, if you want to do, he's just loading up the presentation now, and then it'll be on the screen in front of you. I also did bring some copies, which this is also available online, that you can download for yourself. So don't hesitate to grab one at the end. And it's been up there since we announced the information center.
Would anybody like one?
I will turn it over now to the Eversource team and let them kind of make their introductions.
Yeah, John Pagano, transmission arborist.
Eric Barber, Project Services. TJ Magnoli, Community Relations.
Captain Farrier, Supervisor of Vegetation Management.
Jonathan Rizzo. I'm the project manager of transmission projects for the whole Eversource territory.
And Robin Kaepernick, the manager of community relations for the whole eastern side of the state.
Good evening. My name's Sean Reddy. I'm the manager of vegetation management for Connecticut for Eversource. Not sure why this is,
Showing 4 different things, I make one.
and it's the top.
So while you're continuing, I will play around back here. I think there's something back here that does look.
So do the folks on the Zoom call, can they see the presentation?
I cannot.
You gotta share it on Zoom. Did you go into your Zoom link and then just share the presentation? Yeah, just hit the switch. You got a nice touch. Okay. Sean, I'm gonna start switching.
Awesome. I can see it. Thank you.
Okay, so if you want the full view, it's on that screen. So, I'm sorry, but I'm not, this is the Board of Education room, so we don't use this that often, but it's a little bigger than our typical boardroom, so.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for, in the town of Madison for having us here for this public information meeting. Let's talk about our transmission project that runs through your town. So for transmission vegetation management, our aim is to protect our facilities and the reliability of our system. Did it not update?
Yeah, for some reason, it's not going through.
What, if you click on slideshow, you
Yeah.
start from the beginning, like at the very top, where it says slideshow in the middle,
Okay, so it's
And that-
showing,
go all the way, take your cursor all the way to the tippy top. Just cursor.
so
Do-
that's reading my screen. That's not part of.
No, you want to,
Yeah, that's sharing, so you're sharing.
you're sharing, but now go to your presentation, your PowerPoint. And then go to slideshow.
Up there. Resume slideshow.
No, just slideshow, like the start.
I usually use it. That's not taking it. Okay, so.
What?
Showing. There we go. Caught up.
Excuse me.
Oh, right on that table. Right
Oh,
on
there
that.
it goes. It's down.
Yeah, right.
Sorry about that. So maybe we're in sync now. Maybe. If we're not in sync on the folks on Zoom, please let us know. and We'll see if we can fix it. Give it a shot. So our transmission system, which interconnects all of the generation plants, the places that generate power like Millstone and other generation plants across the state and across the region, our transmission system connects those generation plants to our distribution system, which are the substation and the lines that run down your streets and deliver power to your homes and businesses. So our effort around vegetation management on our transmission is to make sure that vegetation does not impact the reliability of our transmission system from either growing into the line or falling into the lines, especially during storms and more severe weather. We have more extensive clearance along our transmission lines, and that's for several reasons. One of them is because of the higher voltage. Whereas you may have voltage running down the street up to 35,000 volts, the transmission lines may be 350,000 volts. So it can be 10 times higher or a whole magnitude greater voltage. So that's why we have taller poles and thicker wire on our transmission system. And we also need greater clearances for our transmission lines to make them reliable for delivery of power. So not only is it a reliability issue, but it is also a public safety issue. If a tree were to come close enough to the lines to cause arcing, that tree can become energized, and it can cause fires, or that tree become electrified, and anybody in the vicinity could receive a shock, potentially fatal at that voltage and amperage. So it is not only a reliability issue, but it's also a public safety issue to keep these lines clear. So the program which we are, and prescription which we are applying to the right-of-way that runs through Madison is what we call our transmission right-of-way reliability program. And we look to create greater clearances down the right-of-ways from the maintained area that it previously was to a greater clearance. Our experience has been over the years and decades is that there is a high likelihood that a tree from inside of the right-of-way can fail and fall on our line. And because of the voltage, the trees don't even have to come in contact with the line to generate arcing or a disturbance to our transmission line. So what we are looking to do is to increase the maintained width or the right-of-way width within the transmission right-of-way. Majority of our lines are in easement, which means that it is the property is held by somebody else, and we have a easement on top of it to build, maintain the transmission system, which includes the allowance to do this vegetation management to prevent disturbances on our transmission system. So what we are looking to do is expand that cleared area out to the easement edge or to 100 feet from the conductors, the wires on our transmission structures.
Yeah, I have to watch my neighbor's NFL Sunday ticket. It's not your best plan.
And that sounds
Sorry.
great. I do love Sunday ticket.
How is the? You told me to hit the presets, now I've totally messed it up. Okay. All right, you're still. We can watch
I'm
the
not
game
watching.
too.
Who's playing? So we're just pausing a second to see if there's.
This is the presets and it should be set, so unfortunately it's not. Okay, they might be having some problems, so I'll let it lie. It's there and you got the handout, so.
Could we actually turn that off so that it's not reflecting on this one?
Could actually turn off so that it's not reflecting on the TV.
Okay. Okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
I thought I was helping, but evidently not.
So in creating this prescription for these right-of-ways, what we took into account is the engineering design of how transmission systems are engineered and designed and built. Because of their greater voltage, as I mentioned before, they need to be higher off the ground. But because of the span length, that's from one structure to the next, and the amount of electricity running through the lines, they're actually designed for the wires to sag, get lower as more voltage is running through them because they actually warm up, heat up, and they expand the wires. And they also have blowout, which is the case if it's windy, that the wire can move out of its natural hanging location out away from the structures. So we have to take into account the sag and sway of the wires, which increases with the voltage of the lines. And we also have to take into account the natural movement and growth of trees, as well as when trees fail. So that's the reasoning behind this increased clearance that we're seeking is to reduce the risk of fall-in, meaning trees that fail and break, hitting or coming close to the line to cause a disturbance. So we will be looking to remove all incompatible trees, which we define as tall growing trees greater than a certain height when they reach their full height at maturity. And in this case, it's greater than 15 feet. So we will seek to remove a tree, regardless of its size right now, that matures taller than 15 feet when it gets full grown. Anything that is smaller than 15 feet at maturity, we will look to leave, to have it remain. If it's not in the way of any roadways, access to the structures, or if it may inadvertently be damaged when other incompatible trees are being removed. But we seek to leave as much of the low-growing compatible species as possible. So we have experienced over the years fall-ins from inside of our right-of-way in all sorts of weather conditions day to day, but especially during severe weather, such as Isaias, such as the snowstorm back in 2011, if you were here at that time, as well as other tropical storms. So what we were seeing is an increase in the number of those disturbances, not in a single location, but across our entire system. And we were looking to reduce the risk and the potential for those trees to fall in day to day, but especially during storm. The issue is that we experienced, and maybe some of you did too, during ECS or those other large storms. If the transmission system is impacted in several locations across our system, we cannot provide power to our distribution system, to your homes and to your businesses. So it can actually delay overall restoration across the state for all of our customers, all of our businesses, and all of our critical facilities that are served by our electric system. So it's key for us as electric delivery corporation to have a reliable as possible transmission system so that then we can deliver power on our distribution system or fix issues if they arise. So this reliability program is in a corridor that runs from Branford over to Old Saybrook. And this map, if you can see it, shows the portion that is going through Madison. And it's approximately just under 3 miles of linear right-of-way that we are looking to expand this clearance on. So these are some of the, if you can read them, depending on what screen you're looking at, these are some of the crossings, road crossings and streets with abutters. And the abutters are property owners that have properties along our transmission right-of-way where we have easement on top of them. So these people will be directly impacted by this work that we are performing. So the company does outreach to these property owners to ensure that, or attempt to ensure that they are aware of this work that's coming up and to what extent the impact is on their property. So we begin by doing letters, and those letters were sent, I believe, last December out to all of the property owners along the route. And that's again from Branford all the way to Old Saybrook. And then we follow that up with direct contact attempts by going door to door down the right of way, talking to each property owner or attempting to contact them through either direct discussion or if they are not home, leaving a door hanger with contact phone and an email that they can reach out to our team to discuss what work is being done, the schedule of the work, and anything else that they may have concerns about regarding the upcoming vegetation management work. We are still under partial COVID rules, even though COVID is completely lifted. So we do look to be respectful of anybody's wishes around any social distancing or any other medical or issues that they may have. So discussions over the phone or through emails or over Zoom if necessary are all possibilities to discuss the work that's happening on a particular property. So that's an overview of the project.
Hopefully you were able to see this plan. So and there are copies there, like I said, and also available on the website. So I think the purpose really is just to have more of a consolidated intent, because I know a lot of you reached out individually to get some questions answered. So we wanted to open this up to the team here, to answer any questions. And I think we'd start with people in the room, and then we will go to people online. And just try to limit it to 2 minutes if you could, please. And then if there's more than that, and we can go back to people, we'll try to do that. And so, I guess I raised it, I opened it up to questions from the public, and if you wanna, I don't know if one of you wants to handle fielding.
Sure. Yes.
Hi, I'm Fran Brady. We have to give our address. What our address is this formal?
No, there's no minutes taken.
No
This is
minutes.
an information
Okay, so I'm
session,
just
so.
So I might have missed it in the beginning. Why wasn't this built into the original plan of when you put the transmission lines in? Why all of a sudden you find out that, oh, trees get a certain height, I better cut them down? Why wasn't this planned in the beginning?
So, some of our transmission right of ways go back over 100 years. And, the forest grows up, trees grow up taller. And, there are different approaches that the company looks to take. And we're constantly reevaluating the performance of our system, as well as what should we do to make it better. So following those large storms in 11 and 12, as well as ECS, we reevaluated the system and identified these fall-in risks as one of the major risks that we have, especially during those major storms. And so decided to make this change.
I'm sorry, that's been a risk for 100 years. Oak trees have always been 100 feet tall. I don't understand, you're not getting to the exact point, what's really changed to make you realize that you did it wrong in the first place?
Well, it wasn't wrong, and trees, an oak tree 100 years ago wasn't as tall as it is today, unless it was already mature.
Mature oak tree always ends up the same height.
Practically, yeah. In general, they do end up the same height. Part of it is, the requirements of our society and our economy and our customers telling us that they want reliable power, and then evaluating over time what is causing those issues, and then making adjustments to our program to address those issues. Blue shirt?
Brian Jones. You used to have a wire zone and a peripheral zone. You used to leave alone trees in the peripheral zone that would grow up to 25 to 30 feet. So all the dogwoods in my backyard were fine. Now all of a sudden, what gave you the right to change the width, the zone, and the height of the trees? Where does that right come from? When did this change? What, because you were down in our in our area 5 years ago. You went through the property, you looked at the dogwoods and said, yeah, these will grow to 25 to 30 feet. They're never going to interfere with a transmission line. Let's be honest about that. Now all of a sudden that's changed. You changed the width of the zone, you changed the height of the trees. So I've spent 20 years looking after these dogwood trees, and you're going to cut them all down. I'm pissed at you folks.
So your question around when we changed it?
Why? What gave you the right to make these changes?
So as the transmission operator, Eversource, having these easements, it gives us the ability to do this vegetation management work. And based on our evaluation of long-term reliability of the system, we decided to make this change.
You decided that my 25-foot dogwood trees are going to interfere with transmission lines. You know what your problem is? You follow all these rules and stuff, and you know what your legal rights are, but you have no common sense. You don't apply any common sense.
Another question?
Hi, Leslie Sood. Is there any data about the ratio of power outages from distribution lines relative to the interferences that you mentioned in the transmission lines in Connecticut and in the area in Madison in particular?
So, the proximity of vegetation, the height of the poles along our distribution lines, there are many more outages along our distribution lines.
How many?
There are typically, 8 to 10,000 outages from trees across the 17,000 miles of distribution lines that Eversource manages in Connecticut. During storms, in one storm like ECS, we could have 12,000 outages across our whole distribution system. Comparatively to transmission, it is much lower rate, but the tolerance is much less also.
What does that mean, the tolerance?
We don't want any disturbances on our transmission system if they are preventable.
So just to clarify, to circle back, maybe you can expound and explain to us. A few storms ago, Madison in particular put a lot of pressure on Eversource. We're, I think, one of the towns that gave you guys a lot of heat. Policy, I think, changed in respect to those storms that put some punitive laws on you guys, saying that if you're out of power for a certain amount of time, you owe us money. So it almost seems sort of like retaliatory. So it's like, okay, you want power, you're gonna, charge us if we don't give you power, but we're gonna make sure, we go follow the laws of physics. So any tree that potentially could fall and we legally can remove, we're gonna remove.
So those are two separate issues. The fines that we paid were the result of ECS, and what was decided was our inadequate response to that storm, which was levied by PURA and through a settlement. PURA is a state regulatory body that oversees the distribution system. Transmission is regulated at the federal level, and this program started in 2016 before that was initiated.
So is there any correlation between what's happening now and legislation that's been put on you guys, or?
No, not for this particular transmission process.
So then I think people kind of want to know what, if we've had these lines for decades and, probably longer, why are we doing this? If it's upsetting, you can clearly listen to everyone and here that's in this room that's furious. And it might not mean something to you guys or to guys who cut trees every day, but to someone who has a cup of coffee every morning and watches a hawk in a tree or takes care of a tree and, it's part of their quality of life. It means an awful lot.
Absolutely. Good point.
Yes.
My concern is, my backyard is red oaks, white oaks, black oaks. They are sturdy trees. They support 500 species of birds and flowers. Those are all gonna be level. What's gonna go in there is tree of heaven, pokeweed, and all the invasives. Now, apparently you claim that you handle vegetative management. It's not vegetative management, it's invasives that are coming in here. You cannot just cut a tree of heaven down and expect it's not gonna grow. It needs to be drilled into, it takes 2 years to kill it. And I don't understand, if an oak tree can live to, some oaks can live to 300 years, they're sturdy trees. There's very little evidence, at least in my neighborhood, of those oak trees breaking and affecting the transmission.
Right.
So why are they gonna be clear cut?
So because they are a species that grows to a height that can cause an issue for our transmission lines, we are looking to remove them from inside of the easement. So they may not have any outward signs of disease or defect, but there could be something internal which we cannot see. And during strong enough storms, any tree can break and fail. So we're trying to reduce that risk by removing those trees that can grow tall enough that could possibly hit the line.
Well, why doesn't Eversource take care of the main roads like Washington Post Road and Route 79 that have tall trees with wires underneath them and they're still standing? But
So-
yet you're going into neighborhoods and changing the whole face of the neighborhood by clear cutting everything that's over 30 feet, which is totally ridiculous. We had the transmission lines were put in 2019. We have not had a power failure since then. We've lived in our home for 38 years. We haven't had any issues with those trees interfering with the lines at all. Behind us, now we've got this huge pole, that 300, whatever, I don't know what the transmission pole. Okay.
So going back to your Atlantis question, we do follow up vegetation management, usually on a 4-year cycle, where first we go through and cut manually or mechanically with a mower, any of the incompatible trees like tree of heaven. Then we follow that up with an herbicide application the year after, so we allow it to resprout, and then we control it with an herbicide. Tree of heaven is an invasive, very hard to kill, heavy seeder, meaning seed producer. And so it is an ongoing management that we have to do. But over time, we have seen that if that is implemented, it creates a low-growing, stable shrub area that is compatible and reduces, does not eliminate, reduces the amount of incompatibles that either grow up through seed spread or from birds or squirrels dropping the seed. So it is a process over time to manage that vegetation. Specific to your question on the roadside, again, that is distribution, that is managed by state law and regulatory orders from Cura. And for all of that tree work, we have to get consent from the property owner, the tree owner, and if it's overhanging or on the public way, also from the town, the tree warden specifically has to issue a permit to trim or remove any specific tree. So it's a different situation.
Yeah, I live next to the Madison substation. So when I bought the house almost 30 years ago, you couldn't see the substation.
Yeah.
So over the time now, you guys have doubled its size, doubled its transformers, taken out the trees, changed the landscape. Now you're gonna be within 5 feet of my property line of my driveway, which means now I've got complete exposure to northern winds. And I've got 4 trees left over that's gonna be hanging over my driveway with no protection. I got a hillside on that side that's gonna be completely exposed now, where, you know, the trees used to protect it before. And I'm basically looking at Starship Enterprise every night. What are we gonna do about something like this? Because you've taken basically most of the value of my property is just without the winds. And I'm concerned about both winter storms and everything else affecting my land. Not to mention that all that shrub is going to dry up, and we're gonna have a problem with possible fire there too. How do you handle that?
So with each property that's impacted, we discussed with them what the impact is from the work that we were doing. And we discuss if a replanting plan is appropriate. And that's based on the impact to the property, what work we are doing versus what we will offer. That is agreed upon with the property owner's approval, made with recommendations based on the site conditions. So all those things that you mentioned, it goes into the factor of what we are suggesting to plant there. But ultimately, it's in agreement with the property owner. We will pay for the plant material and the installation based on the agreed upon plan. But then aftercare, watering is the responsibility of the property owner once the plants are installed.
Okay, what about the trees that are left behind to have no more protection, no more buffer zones? I don't know about other homes, but I'm sure down the line in that where we have northern winds come in, if there's only 1 or 2 trees left behind, now they become a danger of coming down on top of your house because you don't have the protection of the buffer zone.
Right. So I'm assuming, I don't know your property particularly, if they are remaining, then they are either compatible or off easement. And so on private property. So as a private property tree and a private property owner, then you can decide what you want to do with your trees.
Just a few more, and then we'll go on. I know these people in the back and have their go online for a few minutes, but then we'll come back to the room.
I didn't hear you answer this woman's question here when she had asked specifically about data about trees falling on these specific transmission lines, not all the other lines. You said terms like high likelihood. I was just curious what that meant. And also, can you opt out of having the herbicides sprayed all over your property if it's on the easement?
So to the first question, we don't provide data regarding outages on transmission because it's federally regulated.
Come on.
But this is not a reactive,
Who provides
it's
the
not
data?
public, this is not a reactive
Then what
program.
data are you quoting when you say it's a high likelihood or a low likelihood?
It's based on the incompatible nature of the tree, it being tall growing and its ability to fail, whether day to day or during major storms, and come close enough to the lines now or in the future.
No data on that.
Cause,
So there's no data.
I didn't say there was no data.
Can I see it?
We can't have.
We don't provide that outreach data. Or weather.
Moving forward with no data?
No, so this is not a reactive program. It is a preventive program. This is preventing
What are you
future
preventing?
outages.
Then if
Future-
it's not happening.
I did not say it wasn't happening.
Okay, so when is it happening? Where?
So it happens day to day. A tree can fall at any time, just like it does in your yard. And
these
then
specific transmission
I'm
lines.
not gonna provide data about specific outages on this transmission.
It has environmental impact.
Why?
reports been
Why?
done on this?
What's the big
Because
thing?
it's a security reason for
We pay the taxes on the property.
security reasons.
All right, I understand, but let's be respectful, let him answer the question. and
He's
then
not
we'll do
answering.
more questions.
I did.
Well, his answer is that for security, I know for security reasons, they're unwilling to provide that information. So
Oh,
you can make a request formally to them for that data, and we'll see if we can try to facilitate that, but I'm just saying, tonight they made that statement very clear, that's all. So I understand people want to see the data, but, you know, we're not gonna get it tonight.
There was a second part to your question, and I don't,
the herbicide and the
So-
environmental impact report.
that's a new question, but, so depending on, what the easement language says, you can discuss, using herbicide on your property. It depends on what is there, how it's maintained. So for example, if it's a lawn area that doesn't have, much natural or wild growth, very little need or no need to do any herbicide application. It's an unmaintained portion of somebody's property that has lots of volunteer trees. We're going to look to do an herbicide application.
Can you opt out of that?
You can ask for that, but it also is dependent on what the easement language says, and they are not all uniform. So you have to look at the specific language within the easement on your property. Yes.
Oh, thanks. Hi, Susan Weibel. I think I probably met or talked to you, or at least interacted with a lot of you prior to now. I have a special request. I promise it will be as quick as possible. I would like you to put up the presentation of the TRRP again, and there are a lot of questions that we would like to go through page by page. Would that be possible?
I mean, we could certainly back up. But
yeah.
if we, just because we have a lot of people waiting online, can we go through a few more questions and then do the presentation?
Possibly, but I feel like this is going to sort of answer a lot of that.
Maybe answer some questions. I just want to be respectful to online. that's
Yeah,
all.
no,
I don't
I
know
get
how
it.
many.
Thank you,
people are
online
actually
people.
there. But
No, you're.
I can't tell if we have hands raised, that's all.
Oh, sorry, you want me to go to online?
I just was wondering, do we have people hands
Yep,
raised
I-
online?
I have 2 people and then there's 5 written questions, so I'll go to the
Okay,
people that have
okay,
their
so
hands.
we will get to them. I'm just trying to make sure everyone gets a fair share, that's all.
Yep.
Oh, okay. All right, I'm gonna unmute the first one then. I have somebody named Matt Bennett.
Hi, good evening. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Hi there. I'm wondering if you can expand on the legal and regulatory process a bit. You mentioned earlier in your presentation that you were, quote, seeking approval. So can you clarify, has approval been granted for the extended zone or is it being sought? In either scenario, with whom does the approval right lie? And to the extent you have it, in this town or state is in disagreement or would look to protest or appeal, who is the body to whom that appeal needs to be brought and what is the process by which that should be handled and executed? Thank you.
Great. So
Can you recite the question, please? We had trouble hearing.
I'll try. And please, I believe it was Matt, if I miss a part, please add it in. So the first part of the approval that I was speaking of was regarding distribution lines, the lines that run down the road, not transmission. And that's under the authority of the PURA, which is the Public Utility Regulatory. Transmission is regulated by FERC and NERC at the federal level. So there is no approval for this program. It is set by the transmission operator, which is Eversource, and applied to our transmission right-of-ways. And dependent on what the easement may or may not say, typically it allows us to perform this vegetation management work. So that was the first part. Second part, you asked about appeal. Was that the second part?
Yeah, I mean, so at the end of the day, Eversource is a utility provider for the benefit of the community, and it presumably has a regulator. I think you're saying this particular aspect is a federal regulator. But somewhere between this community and the people who have control, whether it's a regulator or a legislator, there is a point at which an appeal process should be lodged and heard and resolved. And I'm just trying to help us as a community understand the process from this point of a public community forum forward, how best to handle our disagreement with the proposed changes.
Sure. So as this is not regulated by the by PURA, they do receive concerns or requests or comments or complaints from property owners, and they do turn that over to us, but they recognize if it's transmission that is out of their jurisdiction that has been established for quite some time. If an individual property owner does not agree with the work that we are doing, the only appeal is through the courts, because this is a property right easement that we have established on the property.
How do you do that if the tree is already cut?
You'd have to talk to a lawyer about what your options are.
So we have to fight the federal government.
Anyone know any good? The federal government, I mean, you can attempt that, but any inquiries to the federal government, they will point to the transmission operator to answer.
Do we want to, Susan, then go to your suggestion? You said had going through the.
Yeah, I'd like to start on page 1, and
Okay.
there are questions that come up on each page that we should get clarified. Okay, all right, so page 1, says February 6, 2023. What's the significance of that date?
That was when we presented this to the town.
Okay, so Peggy, you guys were presented with this, because I know when I contacted Jacqueline, they said there was no record of it from that date.
We saw a presentation, which I told you, but I don't recall the specifics of it. It did talk about the vegetation management plan.
Okay, so it wasn't necessarily this slide deck.
I don't know.
Okay.
But I know we gave a general overview. I know, but until we talked about it until you understand what the intention was, it's a little different.
Yeah, okay, all right, so that's what that date is. Okay, next page. Okay, so one of the things as well is that there are a bunch of pictures that are included in here. That if you look at them, they don't necessarily show a full 150-foot clearance, which is the proposed right-of-way that they're going to be clear cutting here. And additionally, in case anyone isn't aware of this, the lines through these rights-of-way don't necessarily, they're not necessarily centered on midline, they're skewed to one side. So they're cutting 100 feet full from the outermost wires on one full side and leaving less than 50 feet on the other side. Okay, so there's a logic to that, which we can discuss later. But my issue with this page is that the picture that's shown is very misleading. If you're presenting this to governments and legislators and other people that are involved in kind of going along with this or thinking it's okay, that's misrepresenting.
So this is an illustration of the before. And it gives an illustrative view of what it would look like before we did the clearing to show the risk that is out there in the right.
Okay, all right, so trees that are a shorter height than distance from the lines are never going to impact the lines. I think that's something that, and again, we're not talking about doing, 35, 40 feet to one side, 35, 40 feet to the other side, which is logical. And I think, we all love our power. We all rely on the power grid. We don't want to see any damage happening to these lines. So that's not really a point of contention. It's when you have a, 20-foot tree, 100 feet out, and you're saying that, oh, there's no way we can leave that because it's going to somehow uproot, fly through the air and land on the line. Okay, and then the sway data and what like that, we would like to talk about what those distances are because, I've done a little bit of digging and might research mine about, arcing distances and things like that. Additionally, we all live in our neighborhoods. As I was walking the other day, there were a lot of winds passing through, like a little micro storm from one of those thunderstorms. And, the lines weren't moving at all. There was no sway, there was no sag, there was no nothing. So the fact that we have the current clearances of probably about 60 to 80 feet total right now. These have been successful vegetation models for, decades. So, and the point that you make too, conduct removal of incompatible vegetation. My point of view, like what studies show that removing short trees farther from the lines are going to ensure any increase in resiliency?
So I'm not aware of any study.
Okay.
That shows that or does not show that. But what we look at is not only today, but the long-term reliability of the system. And it is more sustainable to remove a small tree that will grow taller eventually now than in the future. It's less impactful over time. We can get it into that low grow shrub community sooner and then manage it over time so it stays that way through vegetation management, integrated vegetation management practices.
Gotcha. Okay, next page. Okay, this is what you usually refer to as a one zone maintenance plan. Yeah, okay. Couple different things here. One, again, I think the diagram's a little misleading because it shows that the trees on the edge that are going to be, left or maintained or be approximately half the height of the poles. What's the height of the poles currently, roughly? I know they're a little bit different in some areas.
These poles or the
Yeah,
poles?
the transmission poles that
I
we
don't know
have.
that off the top.
Okay, they're pretty high because in 2019 they came through, they replaced them with sturdier pole, which was fine. I mean, we're all for getting rid of, the wooden woodpecker filled poles. But they replaced them with the big metal ones and they are significantly higher. So the wires are also significantly higher. But this, the way it looks here, there's no data for measurement. It looks like there's going to be an Is this like an alarm? We have to.
No, it's back on the other side of that.
Oh, a hand dryer or
There's probably a hand dryer.
Anyway, so back to this. So again, this being a specific TRRP for Madison, I would like to see a diagram that reflects more of the right of way that passes through Madison, where we have, a tall pole skewed to the side. You're having, less than 50 feet clear to one side, but a full 100 feet from the outer wires on the other side. And then these tall trees that are drawn in there, they're really not to scale. They're not going to be part of our plan when we're done. So I feel like, again, this being an official document that's going to be registered with the town and available for reference for anyone who wants it, it needs to reflect reality. That was one of my concerns on that one. The other thing is that I know, Kathy, you and I have had conversations multiple times about adopting maybe a 2-zone plan where we have a bigger border zone with trees being able to be 25 feet or maybe even taller. And I also talked to Jim Delisle, which, by the way, is he not here? He's not here? Okay, is he still working for you guys?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. And I had a long conversation with him a couple weeks ago, and he had also corroborated that and said, basically, the new plan now is that 25 feet on either side is going to be completely cleared with nothing above 3 feet allowed to grow. And then outside of that, we would have up to 25 feet all the way out. Again, and those are up to 25 feet in a species maturity definition, not leaving, a 10-foot tall pine tree.
Right.
But again, allowing trees to grow taller. That would be the 25 to 100 feet zone. So where are we on that? Because this doesn't reflect that.
Right, so right-of-way widths vary and the number of lines in them vary. So this is, if you will, a generic
Yeah.
Diagram showing what the intention of this program is. And it's not made specific for any particular property or any project. Because there are right-of-ways where there are sometimes multiple lines, sometimes there's a single line, and it can vary. The width of the easement can vary. All of these factors change, where the transmission lines are within that right-of-way change. And so it's hard to capture that in, we would need 400 of these different diagrams to explain to everybody about their particular property. So we use this generic one.
Right.
But I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, no, but my other point too is that the right of way that passes through Madison, it's like 2.98 miles or something, really basically 3 miles. So the orientation for it is pretty much the same throughout town. I mean, maybe plus or minus a couple feet on where those lines are, going through the side of the right of way. So I feel like we should get one that's more representative. And then it also should include, if we're talking about a 2-zone maintenance, with the 100-foot side being maintained differently, because we allow now higher trees, that we should include that in this document. I know you sent that to me on the email, but it wasn't included here. And it also didn't have distances. So I think that's important information, for us to have, as well as any other residents, as well as the town to have on legal record.
So the issue with the distances, again, we don't currently tailor these diagrams for any particular easement, and even on the same right of way, easements can vary by maybe like hundreds of feet difference from property to property. So again, it gets very hard to make it very specific to any one property or a section of right of way.
Okay, all right, but this two zone maintenance that we did get says for lines that are less than 200 kilovolts, ours are 115 kilovolt. And it's a 25-foot from the outside edge of the wire, complete clear zone. After that's a border zone preceded by the other zone, which again, we're gonna have, ideally a scaling of tree heights with the trees that are more towards the end of the 100-foot side, really not being touched unless they're giant dead, literally at risk at the moment. And I know you guys have arborists on staff. We've also contracted with an arborist on our end to give us valid feedback. And this is someone who's nationally recognized, so we obviously trust their information. So again, I would like, more information if it's going to be part of this, TRRP that's on file to reflect that. The other bit on this part over here, it talks about comprehensive remediation plan. I know you have people that we, have been in contact with. I know some of our Guilford neighbors are already starting to map this out a little bit. But we would like that in writing. I mean, a lot of this is really the only thing that we've seen in writing in the last 2.5 months since we were contacted about this project. Just as a side note, the December thing, no one got letters. Did anyone here get a letter in December? No. Okay, and that's really universal. We were contacted the end of May, when Jim Delisle came through the neighborhood, and I think that's pretty consistent. So please stop saying this December thing because it's completely invalid. So again, since the end of May, we've really been, as you know, in contact with you, trying to get answers to these things that are going to impact pretty much everything that we experience as homeowners. But we would like comprehensive remediation plan to be designed individually, provided in writing, and have a timeline with that. Now, based on last summer, we had some of this work already started on the other side of the easement. It was a giant mess. There has been zero remediation. We have now, which we've never had before, tons of this tree of heaven, the spotted lanternfly nesting sites, situation. And I was just walking through it again today, and now there's all these little seedlings popping up, which were not the case about a month ago. And this tree, I think it grows, 10 feet a day. I mean, it's just ginormous at this point.
Not quite, but almost.
I mean, but the thing is, it's but there hasn't been, and we've made requests since the end of last summer to have someone come in and do this remediation, and there were other things too, which I won't get into, but, we haven't had any response. It's just, a black box of no response, and it's been over a year. So we're, again, relatively afraid of that. We're going to end up with that again.
Any answer to that one?
Well, we have mailed planting commitment letters to a lot of people in Madison.
Not one of them got it here.
I'm sorry?
We didn't get them here.
Yes, we did. I have properties that, we have emails sent to.
Letter in December, though.
I'm sorry?
She's not talking about planting commitments letters.
Yeah.
I'm kind of talking about both, actually. I was just making a point of reference that when you keep mentioning the December date, none of us got those, notice of vegetation management project coming, that.
Well, the gentleman behind you raised his hand, actually.
Okay, but then the other letter, which I think we were referring to was.
Yeah, the
more-
planting commitment letter,
Yes,
which is our
exactly.
commitment to provide you mitigation.
Yeah.
And those have been mailed. Did you not receive any?
The letters also didn't say the extent of the work at all. In fact, most of my neighbors had no idea even after receiving the letters and the flyers.
We didn't receive one. Maybe they haven't gone out yet. I mean, I know you're working with Guilford first because this project is coming from Branford to Guilford to Madison.
So there's a couple different issues. I want to make sure I have it clear to understand. So we send out the letters via first-class mail, and it's just an Eversource envelope with a letter included highlighting what's upcoming and provides a phone number and an email to contact if you have any questions in that time. We have record that they were sent out, whether you received them, once USPS picks them up, I don't have any control of what happens from there. The direct contact, it is a door hanger. We cannot put this extensive information regarding what work is happening on your property there.
Right.
And even if we could, it would be a book.
Yeah.
So, and it would be, again, personalized for every property. That doesn't really work from just leaving a door hanger saying, we have upcoming work, please contact us.
Right.
If you have questions. The individual planting plans, we recommend that those are done after the work is completed so that you can see what it looks like after the work's done. Sometimes it is hard for folks to realize what it's going to look like after the work is done. So we recommend doing the planting plan after the work is done. And the letter that Kathy's speaking to is once that discussion has happened with an individual property owner from one of our team, then we send a letter to them of intent saying we plan to do this. So that's a
Okay.
commitment letter,
Okay.
excuse me, to say that we have a
Okay,
commitment
so-
to do this planting plan. And we'll work with you to decide what gets done and then when it gets installed.
Okay, and what's the timeline on that? We've heard a lot of different things, so I'd like to just
So
get that.
it's, part of it is based on when the work gets done. We had talked earlier that it was going to be happening in August
Mhm.
because of weather and other things, delays happen. And so this work is not going to be happening in August, this month. So if the work was happening in August and the planting plan was in place, there was a possibility that planting could happen in the fall.
Okay.
That window is now basically closed. We have it all the plantings lined up, all the planting plan agreements in place for the fall. And so by the time this work is done, we wouldn't be looking to do the planting until next spring. Can't really plant in the winter, not the best time, especially if the ground is frozen. Fall and spring are the best for survivability of the installed plant.
Okay, all right, so just to clarify, because we had heard a year later, and we know based on what happened from the clearing last summer, a year later, it's like, boy, you're chasing a disaster at that point. And my other point is that, yes, we can't completely visualize what's going to be left once this whole thing happens, but when you're cutting, 80-foot swath of trees, we can pretty much visualize what that's gonna look like. So to make sure that this is a very, seamless, stepwise process, that's why we were requesting to have some of these discussions maybe ongoing when they were here, maybe independent of when the trees were cutting, the crews were cutting the trees. Because we know that there's gonna be a significant amount of stuff that needs to be planned out, and we could always finalize it once it's done. But so it's gonna be pretty contiguous with doing the tree cutting, getting the plans going, and then planting as soon as the weather window opens up. It's not gonna be a year or so that we were told before.
Well, I don't know exactly what you were told. They may have said next year, but the earliest window is for the spring for this project.
Okay,
But that's if a planting plan is in place, meaning agreed upon.
yeah.
So if there's not, then we don't do the planting. If there's still discussion happening with the
Okay.
property owner and our team about what is going to be planted
Mhm.
and can it be maintained by the property owner after it's installed,
Mhm.
then we can move forward. So I just want to highlight that piece a bit.
Yeah,
Because there are some properties, not particularly any here, but there are some properties where it is far afield, far away from any water source. And so watering plants is not really an option. Or the people are incapable of hauling water out there. So we're not going to plant something in an unmaintained area that cannot be maintained by watering after the planting.
and that'll be determined through discussions with you and the
That's right.
homeowners of the property. Because I think all of us have different ideas about, what we can do. Okay,
Do
keep
you want
moving
to
on
do
with
any
this next
online
picture.
questions? Or,
Well,
I don't know who's on.
We could have more questions if they're related to this, but I do want to get to the end of this by the time we're done.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Why don't we take a break and have a
Okay.
few people answer questions in the room?
Do I need to stop sharing?
No, you can leave it up.
I have one more question. Is there any lumbering or sale of the timber from these?
So
Project.
the property owner has the ability to keep the wood if they wish, once it's cut down. And we will put it in an area outside of our easement for their use, whatever they want to do with it. If they do not want it, then we haul it away. And occasionally it does get sold to offset the cost of the work. Usually for wood processing, meaning a firewood.
So let me get this straight. You get the money from the logging. I got a tree outside my house that's worth 30 G's, maybe not chopped up. However, so you're gonna cut it down, then you get the money from the loggers. I'm minus a tree that's, okay, that's 80 feet tall, they'll never touch a wire. We're gonna cut that down because it could possibly hit something. So what do? Chop everybody's head off that's 6'5" because they might go to 7'5"? Should we do that? No, I think we should.
Really relevant.
You don't understand the analogy?
No, it's not really
7'5" and 6'5" and these feet and that feet, just to accomplish a financial goal, which is
It's not to
yours.
accomplish the financial goals.
Well, then give us the money for it.
Well, so it is your tree, once we cut it down.
No.
What you
We want the money from the logging company.
So that is an occasional thing. Most of the
Oh,
time. it
who
goes-
gets that? You, Eversource,
No,
or the
you're not-
cutters?
you're not there. So it's an offset included in the cost of disposal by the contractor. It's a way for them to dispose of it, because all of that wood has to be disposed of one way or the other. And so it either is given away.
So it's either given to you or nobody.
No, we don't take any wood, we don't keep any wood ourselves.
I understand, you don't keep anything, yeah.
So,
Maybe a few more of the
Questions?
put his hand down, yes.
Hi. I have a question about the surveying.
Mhm.
Does Eversource maintain a map of the lines they've surveyed anywhere? Because actually, I think when you guys first came out, you confirmed the one side of the easement that you had been maintaining, and then someone came out recently and resurveyed it. It's very different. It seems to give a lot more space to Eversource on the side that you're currently working on. And I just want to understand, like, do you come out and resurvey that every time when this is what you're doing for the transmission lines? When you come back to do distribution lines, are they going to resurvey and be like, oh, we were wrong, actually? We're going to
Typically-
take back those.
So the survey information is done by contractor surveys primarily, but we do have some in-house surveyors, Eversource employees that do it. This was primarily done by a vendor, a surveying professional surveyor vendor, who then goes out and does the flagging and then provides us back information, which we keep. But the ultimate information is at town hall. That is the record of the easement.
So why are the new surveyed lines so different from what is on record at town hall and what was previously
know.
surveyed?
I can't answer, but I can look into that and find out. But
Okay.
upon the request of that neighborhood, we went out and remarked it. I
Yeah.
don't know that it was changed. We can look into that and find out.
Okay,
Provide it
thanks.
afterwards. Yes,
What's the likelihood this project happens this year?
very likely.
Okay, so you're gonna cut down right through November, December if you have to?
Yes, we work year round.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just wondering, there are, I guess, 10 people online that there's a number of questions just to take, or 3 hands, I guess. So we could go online for a few minutes because some people have not had an opportunity.
Hey, you're being in the
So
neighborhood
Jack-
anyway, right?
So Jacqueline, if you want to invite up the first question, hands raised.
Okay, yeah, just so you know, we have 3 hands raised and then there's 11 written questions. So if I can those after too. So I'm gonna go to Ann.
Okay.
Hi, this is Anna. I had a quick question about the surveying question that was just asked. Is there a way for property owners to know, at the time of construction, if Eversource has breached the easement line? Does a surveyor go out there and stake that line and, property owners can watch foresters hopefully hold that line? Is there some sort of QA/QC there, or is there some way we can know?
So, the original survey happened last year at some time late in the year with initial flagging. There's additional flagging when requested for particular properties to verify where that easement line is. And then there's additional flagging that happens for environmental reasons, for wetlands and other sensitive areas. So there might be a lot of different colors of flagging, but the edge of easement is done, typically the year before initially, and then touched up as needed, because it is just typically a plastic flagging that comes in a roll, sometimes a stake, depending on the terrain, and the vegetation that's there. Obviously, the more vegetation, staking doesn't happen. We also typically don't stake in the middle of somebody's yard. We attempt not to. It's done initially, and recorded on a map for our workers, and then touched up as necessary if it's unclear or requested by the property owner.
How much request that?
Okay, next question, Jacqueline?
Okay, I think Anna asked, though, how do you request that information? I don't know if you.
I'm sorry.
So if you don't have our any contact information for any of our team, we can provide that.
Okay, I'm gonna unmute Skip.
And just so you know, what we will do, the town will post that on the website along with the presentation that's already posted. We'll put a contact list for the team.
While we're waiting, does the tree warden have any role in what you just said? We can't reach out to him, he's
So the tree warden does if the right of way crosses town property or a town roadway. If there's any trees in the town roadway, then the tree warden, we have to follow the tree warden law statute.
we have to police it ourselves. If you violate the sort of the original survey lines, if you go past it, we have to go after you personally. We can't go to, there's no town police, so to speak, to enforce the,
And I don't know if there's any trees in the right of way.
Where it crosses roads.
Is it, but, no, but some of them are state roads, so I'd have to go back and check.
Yeah,
So,
state road, we would speak
Yeah.
with the DOT.
Yeah.
Town roads, if there are any trees in the town road right away, then we talk to the tree warden.
Yeah, but I don't think the tree warden has had any contact regarding that, but I'll double check. So, but I think the conversation was that there was not any.
I've only been to one neighborhood and there were no trees in the town road right
Yeah.
away that we were looking to.
But,
Looks like Skip stuff.
Okay, I have Skip, but he has not unmuted. So Skip, if you're there, can you unmute? Otherwise, I'm gonna move to the next person. I can come back to him. I'm gonna move to the next person, Deb King.
Hi, thank you for taking our questions. Is Eversource allowed to cut trees within a wetland review area without a formal review or within property that's under appeal?
We are allowed to do selective removal in wetlands of trees that are incompatible. Depending on the how that work is done, it may trigger review and self-certification or a permit requirement dependent on the wetlands that are involved, the method for removing it, and who owns that property, if you will. Chris, anything to add on that?
my name's Chris Fritz. I work for Burns McDonald. I'm here representing Eversource Licensing and Permitting. All the permitting is done through the DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers at the federal level. And like Sean said, depending on the way the work is done, typically if we're placing mats or some sort of temporary fill in a wetland, a lot of times we'll put construction mats down for the equipment to traverse and protect the ground. That does require a permit. The act of removing a tree itself does not trigger the need for a permit. It's the placement of a fill in that wetland. The matting we use is temporary. Sean mentioned a self-certification. We permit, like I said, through DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers via the general permit process. And depending on the level of impact, we generally use what's called a self-verification process, where we submit information to the DEP and the Corps, they review it, they respond with a authorization to do the work.
Can I just ask a follow-up question to that? Because I don't think when we spoke, I asked this question, but what if there's, does DEP and Army Corps survey the area for species of interest or species of concern to make sure that there wouldn't be any
Wildlife or plants.
wildlife, particularly birds, Endangered Species Act, type of
As
stuff?
part of the permitting process, we do need to go through that. As part of the verification process, we need to go through the state level review, which is the NPDB, National Diversity Database that DEP maintains. So we do a review there. And then at the federal level, they have an online resource. It's IPAC, information planning and consultation tool or something like that. And we enter all our data into that, and they are able, based on the information we enter, they provide feedback to us about whether federal endangered species are there or not. And if there are, at either the state or the federal level, before we get our permit, we have to, go through the consultation and develop and agree to BMPs that will protect those species.
And BMPs are best management practice.
And has that, so that nothing's been flagged with regard to for Madison?
No.
Well, for the whole, I'm concerned, I want to know for the whole project.
They're not in Madison. There are other parts of this project where we are surveying for rare plants, and if they're found, they are flagged. Madison, what we got from the state level was turtles, which is really no surprise. We have eastern box turtle and spotted turtle, that the only two species that the DEP identified. At the federal level, northern long-eared bat was identified.
And what happens with the turtles being identified? Is there a change in course of action around those areas?
No, like I said, DEP requires certain best management practices to be implemented, and there's various things. There's really three different components. It's we have to educate our contractors about the possible presence and what they should be looking out for. We have practices like they have to do sweeps of the area before work starts. They can't do certain things near water courses and things like that. They have to fell trees away versus falling trees across and things like that. And then if we find something, we are obligated to report to the DEP that we found a box turtle in this location or a spotted turtle in that location. So. those are
And
the
nothing
techniques
on
we
nested
highlight.
birds like a bald eagle nest or
That does come up. Yeah, we have nesting bird concerns on some of the projects. I think we do have that on portions of this project, but not, like I said, the only thing in Madison that we got advised of is turtles.
Mount Laurel, is that protected?
No,
No, not me.
safe flower, but not protected. It was at one time, but not, it is not.
So just as
Compatible species.
Senator Cohen, thank you for speaking. But so it sounds like the law is on your side, basically. You're allowed to do whatever you are legally allowed, which is a lot in your easement. And we're in a democracy. And so our elected officials are the people that can change the law to prevent you from doing what you're doing. So while we appreciate you telling us what you intend to do and it's helpful, there's really not anything any of us are going to say today to change what you're going to do because the law is on your side.
That's correct.
Thank you.
In the back? What is one?
Yeah, I was just curious, the markings, the flagging with the little plastic flags, certainly behind my house, are insufficient to understand what the line is. What assurances would we have that the company you're using isn't going to inadvertently cross that line in several different areas or significantly?
Sure.
And once it's done, what is it? Oops. So like, for instance, there's no run line, there's no 5 feet buffer from the flagging line to give the homeowner assurance that you won't be on their property. What assurance can you give other than adding more flags to it? Because I understand you have had that problem already when you cut once before where your company went on to at least one homeowner's property that we're aware of and did some cutting they should have. So can you explain that, please?
Sure. So as I mentioned, the flagging is initially done, and then if the property owner has a question about it, they can raise that and we can review it with them to show them where that line is specific on their property. Then with our contractors, we do what's called a walk down. We walk the right of way in sections to look at the work ahead, where the line is, compare that to the information that we have on our maps to verify that it matches. And then talk about any issues, any questions, any special condition areas, any particular access issues. And we talk about the operational methods that are going to be used there to do this work. Then we have on-site an Eversource employee monitoring the crews every day to make sure they are working safely, that they are doing the work that they're supposed to, and that they are staying within the identified property easement boundary line.
Thank
Can I ask a question? I mean, because that was a little concerning, the statement you just made, right? Because we're all here to give feedback. and I understand you don't set the policies, you don't set the rules, right? You're the implementers, right? You as individuals.
Which rules are you talking about?
I'm just talking about your guidelines and what you're gonna be cutting down and.
We set that, event management set that for.
Yeah, for, you did personally? I'm
Yes.
saying there is a policy level that is national, right? That is a federal policy or an approach that is impacting more just what's happening in Madison, it's happening along the entire transmission, right?
So
So that policy comes down, is that different for what you're doing now here versus what is happening in other states?
So the federal regulatory, they regulate the
Right.
transmission operators.
I-
They do not tell us how to operate.
Right.
They just say that we must manage vegetation. The
Right.
transmission operator, Eversource, makes the
Right.
decision on what prescription and how to manage the vegetation in the right of way.
I understand that, but when I say there's you are representing Eversource.
Yes,
I
we
would
are,
hope that the feedback that you're getting from the community is taken seriously and brought up to the people that set the policies. I mean, so you said that nothing was gonna happen, like none of this matters, right?
No, I didn't say it didn't matter.
Well, no, you said it
But
wasn't.
You did.
Well, how?
Yes, you did.
No, you
said
said,
it won't change.
I know,
Yes, it
and I'm
is
not
gonna
trying to be, I'm just, what I'm trying to get is that I would hope that as a company that is trying to be more customer service oriented and community oriented, that this would be taken and feedback would be given up the chain that sets the policies, that sets the clear cutting policy versus the selective policy, right? Because that's really kind of what we're dealing with here. We dealt with the Riverside Road situation. Riverside Road situation was selective. It was, we're going to, and this was tree removal, vegetation management, right? That it was a very different situation. You're dealing with private property. This is a different approach, a vastly different approach, right? So, there were decisions made by the executives of Eversource, I'm assuming further up the chain, that said, this is how we're gonna handle this, and there's not gonna be a deviation from this policy. I would hope that you, as representatives of Eversource, would take this feedback and you've had these meetings, multiple meetings in multiple towns, and would say that we will pass this up.
You can't trust that.
You know, so, no, I
You have to
understand
put
that,
it
but
in-
I'm just
You
trying
have to put
to.
it in writing
No, no, no.
to them.
We will be, but I guess my point is
But I
that,
don't know
like,
that we do.
I think it's a
We're
little,
looking at it.
I'm just, my point is more that I would like to at least, you could confirm that we're not wasting our time here.
there's no waste of time in having a
Okay,
discussion.
that's why I'm
There's
trying
getting
to,
information out to the
but no,
public.
no, but I just wanna make sure that this is gonna be reported back officially to your other executives about the concerns of the residents of this town. Will
Yes,
it
we
be?
provide feedback on our public
Okay,
information
all
meetings
right, and
to our
it's-
executives.
Right, and I think that is important.
But as the manager of vegetation management, as an industry expert,
Yeah.
and is looking at best management practices from across the country and what our objective is, which is improve reliability day-to-day and during storms, the company counts on us as subject matter experts to provide recommendations. And one of those recommendations is to do additional clearing in our right-of-ways. And that's the specification that we have drawn up. That's
But
the
as we all
operation
know-
maintenance program that we are implementing,
Right.
and that's part of our procedures.
All right, so I guess I'm just requesting that, you know, these residents are obviously have very valid concerns because of the fact that this is a much more broad-based approach to this, that there's no selection at all, that it is pretty much where anything within the right of way is coming down, period. That if it qualifies under your species qualification, right?
That's correct.
So, and I think you've heard from this group, you've heard it from Guilford, you're gonna continue that people are outraged by this because it has a huge impact on their quality of life, right? And the values of their homes.
Right.
So that feedback needs to be much louder, I think. And I just want assurances that this will be taken seriously back and given to management and seriously for them to really reconsider some of the ways they're managing this program. So I guess I'm trying to make this clear, because that was very concerning, your statement, and then the answer that we received. I was kind of offended a little bit too, because we've really tried to make this more, that we would have an impact, you know, that this would mean something to people.
Yes, and so the
So-
collaboration that we are offering is the replanting.
So I just wanted to, I just,
You don't have to, and so, you know, we understand.
No, I know, I'm just trying to.
I know we will be back.
I know you've been very helpful at times and we've been trying to be cooperative, but that was concerning. So with that though, there are legitimate questions that people have just about the operational rollout of this, right? Which it seems like people have. I'm sorry.
You know,
John.
most good neighbors work together and they make, they come to an agreement on stuff. You're bullying. You're coming in and saying, this is it, this is it, this is it. And what you're gonna come back and plant, I mean, that's nothing. That's not, you're destroying property values, you're destroying quality of life, you're destroying neighborhoods.
Eversource is
wildlife.
not being a good neighbor.
You're not being a good neighbor. You're being a really, really housing.
I've lived there for 40 years. I've been the steward of that property. And I can't put up a 100-foot fence. When you have a crummy neighbor, you might put a fence up next door so you don't see it. I can't do that. It's not gonna block them. And I can't move because my property value is gonna go down $200,000-300,000
Because of you.
because of your policy.
And so
And
you-
I don't get a lot of compassion from it.
No, but are you a homeowner?
I don't know what that has to do with.
Well, it
You own a
does,
home.
because, answer the question, are you a homeowner?
Yes, why?
Okay, well, so you understand about property values, and they go up, down, whatever, but you are coming in and blatantly, like, just destroying everyone's here's property values.
Yeah, so I
So
think,
that's a whole
think,
different issue.
I think
No
we should,
kidding.
I obviously, people are very passionate about this, and
Aren't you passionate about your home?
No, I am, and so, but I think what we've learned is that really what they're here for is just to answer questions about the implementation.
Well, then you wasted everyone's time, because I
I'm
thought,
just.
if there's a little room for negotiation and working
Yeah.
together, you know, he's my neighbor. You know,
I
I didn't like my neighbor having loud music every night. I go over and say, hey, look, can you turn it off at 9? You know, geez, your dog's barking all day. Can you like do something about your dog? You're not working with us.
Well, so I think that sympathy has been expressed, that's kind of what I was trying to express as well. But I think now there are some questions that people have that might be, they can provide some specific answers to. So, I know you've had your hand up in the back, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm actually from Killingworth, and you use my driveway to get into the lines.
Oh.
Okay, so now you're taking 50 more feet. You're talking 1 3/4 of my property of woods. I can't go out there with a hose and water plants. How are you going to restore that? And what is it going to look at? Because I was told it was gonna be hundreds of trees. Is that 100 stumps sticking up? Are they being ground? What are you going to replant?
So.
And I have one more that goes along, because I'm really not an authority on this by any stretch of the imagination. But I'm concerned about runoff. There's a pond here, there's a pond here, and there's wetlands. And when they did put in the steel poles, the contour of my land was changed. And it was not restored or replanted nicely. But it did affect, I can see in the wetlands where there's more water. I can see the change. Is it drastic? No, but it's happening year to year. So will this cutting down of these hundreds of trees, and I don't even know what I'm picturing at this point. How is that going to affect the water levels of these ponds?
So that's a difficult question to answer. So that's dependent on, you know, a lot of different factors, including the soil that's there. Trees do first deflect and absorb some rainwater that comes down and then absorbs it up through the roots. You know, any vegetation that does fill in there won't provide as much as a full-grown oak tree or other trees, but will provide some. Specific to stumps, that is an option to discuss. We typically will consider doing stump grinding if it's in like a maintained lawn area. But an unmaintained area, unless you're looking to convert it, which is also a possibility to grass or other things that can be discussed, depending on the area and what's there, that can be discussed to see what the options are for.
Stumps are part of maintenance?
Excuse me?
Stumps are then part of maintenance?
Stumps are part of maintenance.
Leaving a stump is part of your maintenance?
Yes.
This is woods. How am I going to maintain? Excuse me.
So that's something that we can discuss with you.
You can't just leave it.
Yeah, typically we cut the trees down close to the ground as possible, but they're usually 3 or 4 or 5 inches tall. There will be resprouting of those trees, and we'll come through on integrated vegetation management and target those, the regrowth, those stump sprouts and root sprouts to control them so they don't grow into full-grown trees.
But where are you planting the replacement trees then?
That's going to be specific to each site. It can be in the easement, but then they'll be smaller. The further away outside the easement, the larger the tree can be. If it's far enough away that it can never hit the lines, then we can plant a large growing tree like an oak or something else.
But on your website, it says, the dogwoods, that gentleman who said he had all these dogwoods on his property, you're cutting his dogwoods to replace with dogwoods. Like, I don't understand. There are trees that are growing in a complete opposite direction of the lines. We had an arborist that Susan mentioned that says there is no way that tree can hit. So you're not selectively taking the trees down, and then you're leaving stumps where we can't even replant to make it look semi-nice again.
So specifically dogwoods, there are different varieties and species. Some are incompatible, some are compatible. So it depends on the type that they are.
The dogwoods grow at a certain height. They're basically all growing to a 35-foot or 25-foot. They're on your website as compatible trees.
For distribution.
So why cut them down to replant them?
But why cut them down?
This high against that high?
So it depends on the
Why cut
species.
why cut trees that are growing in an opposite direction of the power line?
So
That's
in
never gonna
severe
hit
enough
the line.
wind, the trees
That's
can go in
not-
any direction.
That's not
Especially-
gonna hit. It's impossible for the
It's
tree to
not.
hit.
During tornadoes and hurricanes, which was
So
not
if a
bad.
tree a mile away, I mean, we're talking about, that makes no sense.
What do? You bought a company and you want everybody who gets electricity from you to pay your mistakes or to pay your maintenance.
But we pay their salary by paying our bill every month.
Which is incredibly high to begin with.
Right, so
About
ours,
third in the about third highest in the
the bill that
country.
we get every month pays their salary, and yet they're sitting here dictating what's gonna happen to our property. So back when they did the transmission lines on put the poles in, 4 or 5 years ago. The steel poles, when they leveled out like that corner of Green Hill and Beekman with the bulldozer and the wood and the whole bit, and they just bulldozed everything and put the thing in there. I got an email from Eversource employee who wrote to me because I wrote after that because it was a little drainage issue. And he wrote, I'm missing the first paragraph, it doesn't really matter. He put, the area appears to be well vegetated and attaining a state of early successful habitat. While one of the cedars furthest away, the one right on the corner of Beekman and Green Hill, while one of the cedars furthest away from your property appears to be dead, an argument can be made for the importance of standing dead snags wood for ecological purposes. So at the same time, I'm going to say that, I'm going to ask if this was the room and that where the gentleman with the white shirt and the white hair is sitting is one of those trees that you don't like. This man, right here. Okay. How are you going to get your equipment to get rid of that tree? Because you talked about you're taking out certain species that you don't like and this and that. How are you going to get that tree out of a parcel of land, whatever it is? How are you going to get to that property to get rid of that tree?
They're talking
So-
about taking the trees down.
I know how it is, but because I was already talked to 2 people up there. But I'd like you to tell everybody here how you're going to do that.
So as I mentioned at the start, we may need to cut down some compatibles to get to the incompatibles. So
And what kind of equipment are you taking through? The ones that just roll through, like big mowers and just get to it, which is what I was told that you were gonna do. So roll through to kill all this vegetation to get to that one tree, correct?
So it depends on the particular situation. We may incorporate a mower to cut a pathway into that incompatible tree. And then depending on the size of that tree, there are different techniques to remove it. We may use what's called a feller butcher, which is a machine that grabs the tree and cuts it at the bottom and then lays it down in pieces or in whole, depending on the size of the tree. We may use a bucket truck to cut it down lower and then remove it completely. And in rare occasions, we have to climb the tree because it's not accessible, meaning we use ropes and saddles to ascend into the tree and then remove it piece by
But
piece.
instead of getting rid of that one tree, you're damaging everything in the swath in the path to get to that one tree.
That may happen.
So I'm thinking there's still some questions online, so let's try to wrap some of those up if we could. Jacqueline, are there any more hands raised online? And then we could go to some of the written questions.
There's no hands raised. I could start with the questions. There's 18 of them, so I'm just gonna read them from the order they went in and.
Yeah, I would go through a couple of them and then, we'll go back to the room. I'm thinking we,
Some of these might be answered. Some of them have maybe been answered, but I'm just gonna
Okay.
start reading them.
okay.
Are you talking about trees on individual people's property or just the lines going through the high voltage structures at a few locations in town? I think that's kind of been answered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will this affect people whose houses are 5 feet from the road with vegetation behind the house?
If their property extends into the right of way and there's an easement, yes.
Okay. I'm just reading what these people, what's been written. You flip-flop on your decisions. You say one thing one day and the next year change your mind based on who is on the team. Please explain the process how you plan to identify those trees currently 15 feet high now or those that can reach the height in the future. How will you clean the area so as not to impact the natural flora and that should be there?
So that's similar to the question,
But yeah, that was just answered.
We have licensed arborists on our team if there's a specific question, but our contractors are also familiar with the types of species that they are trying to remove and aware there's a lot more vegetation that is compatible. And so they may not know all the different species, but they know which are incompatible. And so they will look to remove those. And as mentioned, if getting to those incompatible trees, we may need to cut some of the others in order to get access, but we try to minimize that based on the situation on individual properties.
Can I just ask follow-up questions on that too? Because I haven't been living and breathing this quite as much as these constituents have, but in terms of when you say incompatible, I know the easement is how wide?
In general, in this area, it's 150 feet wide. Is that correct? Yeah.
Okay, so 150 feet, but can you explain like why something that's, 15 feet, 20 feet is incompatible at the edges of that easement with the transmission lines?
So if the tree's within the easement,
Yes.
we look at what the species is and its mature height, meaning how tall it gets when it gets full grown. And while that can vary greatly for a particular species of tree based on site conditions, weather, amount of moisture, as well as the genetics of the tree, in general, there's a range which these trees grow, particular species. And so we base it on the species and how tall they grow at maturity.
Okay, but so it's my understanding that anything above 15 feet is coming down. Is that correct?
That grows to be above 15 feet.
Correct. So I'm just wondering, so let's say we're out 75 feet from the transmission lines and there's a tree, a species of concern there that you're saying is incompatible, that gets to a max height of 20 feet or is at 20 feet right now. How does that compromise the transmission lines? Are you saying that the lines sway out 85 feet?
So we take into account the sag, the lowering of the line and the sway, which when it's at max operating voltage is when it's at its worst. And that's built into the design of the transmission system.
So the sway can go out how many feet?
It depends on the line, the distance between structures. It varies, but it can be 20 feet.
Okay, so beyond the 20 feet, let's say between 20 and 100 feet with the easement,
how does a tree that's 20 feet tall, how would that tree compromise the lines?
So we also have to take into account the growth as well as the movement of trees during all weather conditions. So that may include tornadoes or hurricanes or other severe weather. So we look at that and made the assessment that that's the height that is incompatible for our transmission lines based on a combination of an engineering analysis as well as a veg management analysis.
I'm just, if there's, I mean, I would think that there's probabilities of that happening. Is that taken under consideration when you come up with this plan? Because I would think that the probability gets lower and lower as you get away from. And is there any room, any wiggle room in terms of creating additional zones as we talk about this?
Yes, so that's what we can look at, is looking to see if we can implement a 2-zone in any of these areas. Again, it depends on where the line is within that right of way and the width of it. But that's something we can consider, is looking at it.
That would be
2
really
zone.
appreciated.
Now, for many of these properties, and I've only been to a small section of Madison, the majority of it are much taller than 25-foot tall growing trees. So will still be removed. I don't want to give any false, hope or impression that, now nothing's going to be cut. The majority of those trees, because it is a wooded area or wooded lot, and, moving towards mature size trees, there's still going to be significant tree removals, even if that border zone was put in, because when you have that closed canopy, there's not a lot of understory, small growing trees, shrubs, or other things that grow in that closed canopy that's there. So there still may not be anything that remains, but we can take a look at that.
I'm sorry. I'll be real quick and then. When you're, and I appreciate those questions, when you're making decisions about probabilities close to lines, are you only considering the lines, the transmission lines that currently exist? Are you planning around the possibility of future transmission lines? Are there plans for future transmission lines? When we look at the width of these sections.
So there is no plan for this right away for an additional line that I'm aware of.
So then you're really just making plans around the one existing.
The existing one.
What about higher voltage being strong on the existing poles?
I'm not aware of any plan to increase the voltage on this line. That doesn't mean it will never happen, and that doesn't mean there never will be an additional line put in. There's no plan right now.
What's generally the timeline for when you would be aware of that?
We typically do a 5-year lookout, and for if there was an additional line, that would require going through siting, which is a state process for major infrastructure building. Additionally, because I'm not sure, but I can find out for you if upgrading the voltage would need to go through siting also. I just don't know all of the siting rules specific to that, but we can find out and provide that information.
Is there any concern about after the canopy, the shade that's provided by that canopy is removed, that we're now going to, have the regrowth of these invasives and grasses that will become drier and more exposed to heat? And then igniting wildfires. I don't think that was something that was top of mind after Isaias. We were just in a wet world, in a windy world. But now we've got Nova Scotia, we've got Canada, we've got Maui burning catastrophically due to, poorly considered and executed vegetation management programs. Before we move forward anymore, has Eversource really thought about wildfire and doing this vegetation management plan so as to avert that disaster? We will get hotter, we will be like North Carolina or Florida within probably, 25, 30 years.
So regarding wildfires, it is incorporated into our all hazards plan. If there is a fire, then we take into consideration what causes fires, right? The most typical in this area, and wildfires are not very common, but with the changing weather, sometimes we're in dry periods. Right now, we're in a very wet period, and it varies wildly. And it's not so much when it's hot, it's actually when it's cooler, because the air doesn't have as much moisture and it's windy. That's your highest risk for wildfires. And the most probable cause in this area, at least from the wildfires I'm aware of, is typically exhaust from some sort of vehicle or some sort of lighter, or lighted, cigarette or something like that, or uncontrolled personal fire. Those are the most typical causes of wildfire. So in general, a grass shrubland doesn't have as much fuel, and more of it is green and herbaceous, and so is not as good a wildfire versus an unmanaged wooded area that's full of branches and debris, which then has a lot of fuel on the ground, like you see out in California and some of the western states, because of the lack of long-term fire suppression, or not the lack of fire suppression, but the implementation of fire suppression. That fuel load increased massively. So it is.
I guess my concern is that this green herbaceous ground cover that you envision for us will eventually become dried out.
Yeah,
And
in
we're
the
gonna have
drought
more of
period,
it,
it could
and
become
we'll have
dry.
more fuel, more kindling, because we're now taking away a whole shade corridor. And so this could have tragic consequences.
Yeah, there's a trade-off
10,
between the
That's a big
fuel from the
trade-off.
trees and the fuel from herbaceous plants and shrubs. More likely, the bigger risk is in the trees and woods.
Yeah, but
In
the-
general, but
But the dried out stuff is definitely more ignitable. I mean, you get some, people, kids, whatever, walking around now. We have these doubly wide corridors, which look a little more accessible than they used to. And, literally, if you go in there and, you throw a match on the cleared area, which is basically a bunch of dry kindling, that's going to go up right away. If you go into the middle of the canopied area, it's dark. There's not a lot of junk on the bottom because it's very well maintained, from its own natural process. So that's not as ignitable. I don't think we're talking actual flammability, because yes, once you get a fire, anything's going to burn. And things that ladder, things that have resins, yes, we realize that's all related to trees versus scrubland. But I think the ignitability is the bigger issue, because that's where things start. And this ignitable area is literally right underneath the power lines.
so luckily we don't have much fire risk currently.
Correct.
I think we
What's
all
going to change?
recognize
I
that
can't
what we
predict.
used
I
to
can't
think.
predict how
was
things
right.
will
I know, where, so I think as we're approaching 8 o'clock, if we can maybe, another question or two in the room, and if people are
I
online.
interrupted the one.
Yeah, there was actually one online, I think that Jacqueline? Oh, there was
Hi,
another
yep,
user who
there's,
said- Oh, she-
yeah, there's like 19 open. I'll go to, the town has zoning regulations to protect the health, safety, and welfare of all residents. That do affect a person's property rights? Why are homeowners allowed to give permission to remove a significant number of trees that will impact neighboring property? That's,
Doesn't apply here.
yeah.
This is not-
Yep. Okay, another one. What data do you have on wetlands management for prospective water table changes on properties adjacent to the management zone and nearby roads with elevation changes and runoff? What studies have been done around possible resulting flooding, and are herbicides being used adjacent to wetlands?
So we're not making any grade changes regarding this work. It is all above surface. So there are no grade changes. I cannot predict what impact or changes to water tables will happen. That's really a function of a lot of different factors. Specific
Vacuum, it's not an alarm.
Specific to the herbicide question, we use EPA approved, state listed, meaning the state pesticide board said these are lawful to use within the state. We use licensed applicators, people who have passed tests about their knowledge of herbicide, specific herbicides and herbicide application, and apply them in a targeted low volume foliar method, meaning we're not spraying hoses across the entire right of way. It's typically a backpack or off of a UTV or ATV tank with a wand going up and spraying the individual plants that we are targeting. Based on what species are there, we use a combination of different herbicides depending on what is there for both the woody incompatible vegetation and some specific invasive plants that are a nuisance or noxious to our employees or for the maintenance and operation of our transmission system. There are herbicides labeled for wetlands, but we do not typically use them. unless in very specific cases. So primarily, we leave a buffer around a wetland where we do not apply any herbicide.
Do you realize that if you guys weren't doing this stuff, that none of these chemicals and all this nonsense would have to even be going on? And that the people who thought they were getting Roundup years ago, who were dying of chemical exposure, they never knew it, but we're being put to the test. We'll be the litmus test for these new chemicals that the EPA is coming out for. Do we really want to be the test for them?
Yeah.
And your chemicals and everything else? We don't have enough problems in this world without this. And so we're saying, you gotta work with us. You gotta work with the community. I mean, it just cannot be a standard,
This is what
we're gonna make it look like the Ukraine when they had 400 tanks going through Russia to go to the Ukraine. That's what it's gonna look like. The whole thing's gonna look like that. And it's gonna be an absolute injustice for all these people to lose all of this money that they put in. Some of these people here 30, 40 years. I'm only here 3.5. But these people be heartbroken at the things that they're gonna miss because of the dollar. And that's really what it's all about here. It's all about who's gonna make more money? Is the company gonna make more money? Are we gonna screw people? And how do we get away with doing it with the least problems? And this is what everybody's thinking. Nobody's afraid to say it. I'm telling you right now, nobody here is happy with the responses that we've gotten from anybody. Because it's a smile, a glim, and a walk away, and a pushback, and that's what it is.
So, my team has spent a lot of time out with lots of property owners. I myself have been out twice to your neighborhood.
Yes.
And now we're here at this public information meeting.
But to get something done. We haven't gotten anything done yet.
Yes.
We have all these meetings, to have a meeting. But let's sit down and do some concrete work. Yes, we're willing to come out to your houses. We're willing to take a look at things that might not happen. Things that we can bend the line on a little bit. Things that we can have a little pushback on, a little give and take. That's what we're looking for. And I don't think anybody in this room is seeing that, are you?
No.
Is anybody?
No.
So that's what we have to work on. We have people who've come from the government. They're coming to ask you. Town people are coming to ask you. Hopefully it'll go the Fed will ask you. Hopefully all this happens because it's wrong. It's just simply wrong. And if this is your property, you'd be thinking the same damn thing. You would be sitting there, but you wouldn't have the grin or the smile, you'd have the frown.
So,
I just have a question. Excuse me. You said that Eversource evaluates every 5 years, correct? On
No.
what might be, no, regarding like, if there's more transmission poles going in or something of that nature. You said Eversource comes to a decision every 5 years.
No, we do it. We have a 5-year look ahead. So we're looking towards next year's projects, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, and 5 years from now, because some of these projects can take that or longer to get implemented. So, but the current plan is looking out 5 years.
So if the transmission pole that was put in 2019, is there a likelihood there's another one going in and that's why you're clear cutting?
So there is no plan that I'm aware of to install any additional
Well,
lines.
who would know that?
So, we asked our planning department, who looks out that 5 years, is there any plan for any additional lines in this right of way? And the answer was no, at this time. In 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I cannot say. But as of right now, there is nothing in the 5-year plan to add a line to this right of way. This clearing is.
But we can't count on this plan being 5 years from then, because it could be 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years.
Well,
Correct.
again, if we were adding a line,
Would that be a yes?
that's a long-term going through siting, which can take years. So as of right now, within the 5-year plan, there's no plan to add a line.
So I think maybe 2 more questions, and then we're approaching 8 o'clock. It's been 2 hours, and I know that there's some ones submitted online. What we can do is send those to you so that they can get response by email at least.
Absolutely.
They're also willing to answer additional questions, via email. So I thought just 2 more questions.
Could I just request that we finish the last couple pages of this? Because I feel like this needs to reflect an accurate record, if this is going to be the record, and if this is going to be the piece that is said, oh, this is what we're
Well,
doing.
why don't we do this? Let's have 2 more questions, and then we'll, if people want to leave, but we can continue on with the presentation. Okay? And we'll kind
And I did
of
have a
finish
quick
with
one, I
that.
did have a quick one. Is glyphosate included on the oversight list that's going to be used for our area?
Yes, but yes,
Okay.
rodeo is what we use.
Sir?
You know, I think you were asked before, what is the incidence that you've had trees hitting these transmission lines? I think you didn't have an answer. You didn't even know the height of your wires. You know, I think you should pretty poorly prepared for this. And then secondly, if you look at it geometrically, with these trees falling for whatever height, it's going to be an arc, so they're not ever going to hit the wires. There could be some that are close and very tall. Yes, maybe something like that should go, but not all the trees that you're proposing. I think you're really overdoing it for sure.
Is there a question there or just?
I'm making a comment.
Great. Thank you.
I mean, you got to, so what, okay, the question, how many incidents have you had of trees hitting wires like
As
this?
I say before, we're not going to provide that information for security.
Oh, come on, you got to have a figure. Otherwise, you're addressing a problem that doesn't exist.
As I mentioned, this is a preventive practice.
Yeah, like a tornado, come on. Connecticut's had 1 or 2 tornadoes and.
5 last year.
Yeah.
Touchdown.
Not worried about fire. Chances of that are really pretty slight. It's like,
I'm never going to
hear left beats.
Never going to try to predict the weather.
So real quick, where do the transmission lines go? Our map shows them just from once, town, a couple towns over and a couple towns this way. Do these go out of state to other?
So the transmission system's broken up into different segments or what we call lines. And this right of way that we are performing this prescription on runs from Branford all the way over to Old Saybrook.
So it's just, and then does it keep going? I mean, so if we were to interrupt this line.
So then there's another line that goes from Old Saybrook east.
Does it go to New York? Does this line go to?
So this line does not go to New York. But we have, and so as a transmission operator, we manage the lines within our transmission territory, which specifically ends at the state borders. However, for Rhode Island and Massachusetts, they're all part of what's called ISO New England, which is the transmission operator for the entire area. They also do markets, but primarily they're working on load management to make sure there's enough load being put into the system from the generators, and make sure we're managing to put it in the right spot so power is delivered. So there are interconnections, and they are sometimes used depending on lots of different factors that, I'm not an engineer or, a grid manager, but it is more likely that energy can be shifted between ISO New England, but in extreme circumstances, we do have an interconnection with New York, and in extreme cases, we could get power delivered from there. This goes back to 2001 with the blackout that occurred, that started in Ohio from, it was a summer day, the land sagged and came in close proximity to a tree, which then caused an outage, and that outage cascaded across the country from DC all the way up into Canada. So that's where transmission operators, along with the federal regulators, set up this system of these breaks, these interconnections that don't automatically flow through to protect the grid from cascading issues, as they're called.
Sean, is there a TRR plan from Saybrook East to where that break, where the new lines start?
So those lines that go from Old Saybrook, they go into Millstone, right?
They go north, that's a CT 26, right?
And then that goes up to Middletown.
And do you have a project plan for that area as well?
That's next year, yeah. So is this a national Eversource or wherever Eversource is? Is Massachusetts following through with this program as well?
Yes.
Is they are?
So Eversource operates in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, and a little bit in Maine, like for half a mile. And we are implementing this specification. We're working on our most critical lines, highest voltages down.
Isn't Massachusetts under appeal right now with Eversource?
There is an appeal that I'm aware of for a gas line, not
With the power line, with this exact situation.
not under appeal. We're going through the permitting process.
You're going through it?
The permitting process with the state.
Okay, so how's that gonna relate to us?
So Massachusetts has their own rules, environmental rules. That's what
But you just told me transmission lines are federal.
Right, but so we have to adhere to any environmental regulations. And that's what their review is regarding.
You're a troublemaker, you know?
No, so these are, you know.
Legitimate questions.
Yeah, legitimate questions.
I guess one question I just have, when I'm looking at this, I don't understand why is a tree 100 feet in danger and 50 feet on one side? Can you just help me explain why
So
why is there a difference on both sides of the?
for this particular project, it's where the transmission line runs within the easement. It's not in the dead center. It's set off to one side. So one side of the easement is much closer than the other one. So that's why the difference. So we can only go to easement edge, and anything off easement, we need consent of the property owner. But we,
Right, but I'm just saying, like, so you're willing to take that risk, obviously you have to, if you don't have it by law, you can't, but why is that okay to deal with? And then you're cutting trees from 50 to 100 feet on the other side where you have this blanket, I have to do this, where that's not going to be the case on the other side. It just doesn't make sense. It's like, there is a very low probability, as you said, that that's going to happen. So why the decision, why not just trim? Why can't you do other alternatives instead of just blanketly cutting?
so we're looking at the long term and, you know, the sustainability of this right of way. And so it's better now to remove the tree and transition it into a shrubland, grassland for the long-term stewardship of that right of way. I saw a question in the back.
Just related to the Eversource versus other territories. This line goes to Brantford. Is that because UI Avangrid handles the lines after that, or like, do they have their own plan west of through New Haven, Bridgeport, that way?
So New Haven does begin the UI territory, and we do have interconnections with them. I can't speak to their plan. I don't know what it is, or what they're doing.
So you don't.
If the ultimate goal is long-term reliability, what is preventing these transmission lines from being buried?
So that would have to go through the siting process and get approval. And burying lines is significantly more expensive than above ground lines, short-term and long-term.
$1 million a mile.
Well, not if you
That's
take
for
everyone who's
roadside.
losing money off their properties.
These are transmission.
If you take all
requirements
the-
are-
Rather than all the-
How deep they have to go, again, not an engineer. All the casings and other requirements for underground for transmission is extremely expensive.
Bury them, maybe.
You
I
can use
just
the
have
money
a
for the trees.
comment that I want to say, you know, to our elected officials and insofar as Eversource might, you know, ever have a seat at tables where these kind of zoning and, you know, discussions happen. I think the lesson here is that residential areas and right-of-ways and power lines do not mix. And I don't think any of us would have ever bought in our homes. We would have just never been able to envision this day 20, 30, 40 years ago. And I think there's a sense of betrayal here. You know, I know we couldn't envision, you know, the crisis in climate and extreme weather events, but still, you know, I'm sure all the people are long gone, but somebody made the decision to sell us and to allow us to invest, you know, the biggest assets that we have into these properties, into these neighborhoods, and then see those assets to be slashed by 20, 30, maybe in some cases 100%, you know, because we bought a home that we wanted to live in and raise our families in and enjoy the beauty around us, and it's now just disintegrating, and that should never have happened. It's water under the bridge, it doesn't change anything now, but I just wanted to say that.
I
think,
This will
last,
help you wrap up.
okay.
I'll just help you wrap up. Based on what first selectwoman said earlier about expecting some sort of action coming out of this meeting. Right? Have you, I don't know what this guy's been writing all day.
Taking notes.
There's no action been taken, right? Do you have any actions coming out of this meeting? Have you heard anybody's questions that you think you have an answer, or is the action on us now to redo all this by sending you an email that give us the standard answer that you give everybody else?
So, you know.
No minutes were taken, no action. I didn't see anybody record any actions at all.
And this is
just, man,
it's not, and please, there's no need for that. This is also recorded, and if the town is be willing, then they can share it with us and we can review it. And we have the comments coming online that we're gonna provide, as well as contact names and numbers.
name one action you're taking away from this meeting.
I'm gonna look into the planting commitment letters that were sent out that I thought went out to several of the residents who said they didn't receive it.
I hope also there, I mean, I think you mentioned to me that we could discuss the possibility of other zones.
Yep.
I hope
We can evaluate
take
that.
your word on that
Yes,
and we can
absolutely.
really talk
So
more
where's the
about
minutes gonna be? You know, this is
This
so loosey-goosey.
is a public information meeting.
It's an information meeting. It is being recorded though also. And that'll be available for anybody to look at. I mean, I think that's where we would hope that this information would go, and there would be some discussions internally about, are there ways that we can, you know, give people some sort of sense of, you know, I guess, more judgment that goes into this process. Because I think really this is what it's coming down to. It's just, we keep talking about selectivity and discretion versus.
We'd just like to know if there's some action you can take to go to your leader and say, are you willing to go to your guys, your superiors, your guys who pay you, and say, this is what's happening in Madison?
So, you know.
Are you willing to do that? So yes or no?
So as was asked earlier, there is a plan to review what happened at this meeting with my boss, who's the vice president. That I'm gonna review what was discussed.
Thank you.
I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what our plan is after this meeting.
Okay,
give us
how
feedback.
quickly can we expect you to go to your boss so that, because these operations are imminent and we need to have clarity on certain issues as far as the monster that we're fighting, or we don't have to be monsters. We actually be adversaries, but we don't have to be enemies. We're an adversary in this, but we can compromise.
So
So you're willing to do that?
So what we offered, as was asked, that we will review it to see if we can make this a 2-zone, at least on one side, because of the proximity of the easement edge to the other. We can evaluate that and determine if larger trees.
Will you evaluate it?
Yes, I said we were going to evaluate.
So you can, will you?
I said we will. We'll evaluate that. That doesn't mean it's going to be implemented, but we'll evaluate it and then come to a decision.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but you said that 2 tiers probably wouldn't impact us in Madison, though, right? You said the trees wouldn't.
Well, again.
That's what I'm saying. So really, what is gonna come out of this that will help all of us to move forward? Like-
So if there is compatible species, if the 2-zone can be applied after evaluation, then if there is vegetation there that grows up to 25 feet, and lots of numbers zipping around my head, 25 feet, they can remain. And also, if there's a planting plan that is implemented and agreed upon with the property owner, that gives you more options for slightly larger, instead of 15, 25-foot planting. And then that will be maintained over time.
How do you determine how much each property owner receives from the trees that are cut down?
So it's based on the impact, you know, what is being done at the property, and then the discussion with the property owner, what they are trying to achieve.
No,
So-
but if you're looking at the value of the tree, if you're
No.
cutting, so you're just blanketly, if you're cutting down 10 trees in somebody's home that are thin, wiry trees versus a homeowner that has mature trees that are valued at a higher, you're just giving the same, everybody's equal. It's,
No, not everybody's equal. It's based on the impact to their property by what work is being done. And then what we can agree upon and what they can maintain after it's installed.
So for every tree you cut down, we were told you're planting another tree in that, there's 3 trees for every 1 tree. That's what we were told when the gentleman came to
That's
our
the
property.
distributor. That's the River Road project. It's not this
Well, that's what
transmission
we were
line.
told when he came to our home.
I don't know if, I'd have to verify that, but that's not typically
One
something.
tree on our property, two others throughout Madison.
Yeah, that's what we were told.
That's what we were told.
Map for trees,
Yeah, that's what, that's what.
I know,
That's what Jim told us.
Mad for Trees, they were looking to, do that planting, but
No,
that's.
no. I am mad for trees.
He's mad for trees.
So I know they
Where
had
that came
suggested
from.
that. I know they had suggested such a thing, but sorry, I didn't mean to
It
speak.
had nothing to do with transmission lines.
That's right.
Okay, okay, so I think that,
Are there more
maybe some
online
clarity on, maybe some more clarity on what that replanting plan is.
Well, that's gonna be specific to every property.
Right, so,
And that's with that property owner.
right.
If they choose to share it or not, that's up to them. We're not
So
gonna be sharing other
when,
people's
when they
information.
get this letter, I guess is that, then they'll be in communication with Eversource about what that plan is.
Right, so again, in discussion with the property owner, if they are interested in a replanting, then we send a letter of commitment saying we'll provide a plan that the property owner will agree with discussion, and then we'll do the planting.
Okay. Okay, so, I think that, I
Online
mean,
questions?
I know, Jacqueline, I mean, I think that there have just been typed ones, and we went through some of them.
Yeah, there's about 20 typed questions still, which I can submit to Eversource tomorrow.
And I think we'll post all those too, just so everybody can have the benefit of seeing what those questions are. I think some of them will probably may have been answered or might overlap with.
We'll answer them all again.
Well, yeah, on the website. So we'll put the contact information, we'll post the questions. And then if there's any additional, I'm just trying to think in terms of, just so everybody gets the same information, right? So we'll figure out a way to, because I think there's gonna be individual correspondence with different property owners directly to your.
So the
question.
questions
So-
that come
Yeah.
from the online source, we
Yeah.
will provide written answers for,
Yeah,
to
right.
the town.
And then we
What
can
the
share
town does
those,
with them, they can choose to
and we can
post them
share
or
at least
whatever.
that, so, and then the recording will also be available.
Peggy,
Well,
I'm
that's
getting
all- It might take a couple
People
days.
have hand raised online that are probably not questions.
So,
Okay, yeah, there's one hand raised, Matt Bennett. That's, I'll unmute him. Hold on.
okay, and then I think we'll try to wrap up.
Hello again. I do, I have a couple comments. I just wanted to really appreciate the gentleman's agreement to take away the consideration of a two-zone modification. And if we can take you at your word and your commitment, it feels like that could be advantageous. I also wanted to just suggest or more formally ask of our elected officials, First Selectman, Woman Lyons, Mr. Parker, Ms. Cohen, to see what else you might be able to do in support from, an escalation, whether that be sort of up the chain to executives within Eversource, or, whether that be to Pura, or if necessary, even our Connecticut federal representatives, so that we can bring additional voice to kind of the community here that's been, as everybody's noted, quite vocal and feeling like we aren't getting to the right level of negotiation or mutually viable outcomes. And then lastly, to the community members, if there is the necessity, the consideration of obtaining legal counsel to further support and guide through the process may be worth doing here if we aren't able to get to the right mutually agreeable outcome that's been discussed. Thank you.
We should address that really quick, just so people know, and please chime in also, Senator Cohen. Our offices have been in touch with our federal representatives because we've heard that a lot of this is federal regulation. So that's our congressmen and our two senators are aware of this issue and actively in conversations. We also have been in conversations with our contacts at Eversource, that not these folks that you see in front of you today, that work in the government relations team, and we have a meeting coming up with other folks of the team. So I want people to know that we're working on that as well. So thank you, Matt, for bringing that up. And people can certainly continue to reach out to us with other questions. Anything you want to add to that, Christine?
No, that's right. Yeah. Doing what we can, but obviously, as Sean mentioned, this is federally regulated. So, feeling like our hands are really tied in this situation, but really want to hear from everybody and encourage folks to also reach out to the federal delegation and see what we can do at that level to address some of the concerns. But the hope is, you know, in these discussions with Eversource, and they've been really willing to come out to the properties, you know, that maybe we can come up with something that is more palatable. I know, you know, that's really what we're going for at this point, because, you know.
But it's federally regulated, it's not mandated. The decision and the mandates are coming
This
from
is
right
from
here.
Eversource.
Yes, so right.
And I just want to chime in and say thank you guys very much too for your involvement and your support. Because of that, as of today, we have the support of Senator Blumenthal. And we had a lengthy discussion with him today about all the aspects of this project. And we will be following up, and it seems very promising, the amount of federal level involvement that we'll be getting from this day forward. So it's mostly because of both of you, and I really appreciate that, or we all collectively.
Yeah.
So
We
that's
asked for
tremendous,
advocacy and we got it.
Yeah.
And we're grateful.
tremendous representation. So thank you.
So thank you.
And if there's time, I mean, I would just like to finish the comments on these pages so that they can be recorded. And hopefully when we get a new TRP, it's going to be updated with relevant information that makes sense for Madison, since this is labeled not generic TRP. It says Madison, Connecticut. So next page, if you're willing.
Over here. Oh.
Nope, that's not it.
Don't cut that tree.
My tree.
Question for the second. Where would I check for a study of salvage? Substation.
That's the level of what? Substance.
What that tree is? Turn it over. That sounds good.
Okay, great, perfect. Okay. Okay, so questions on this. Talks about that may potentially. Again, not to beat a dead horse, but do you actually have data which says potential? What is potential? How is that defined? Is it just
So-
existing in a 1 mile radius, or what's potential?
So it's based on the design and engineering of the transmission lines, the sag and sway of the wires, with the trees,
Okay,
and then the mature height of trees.
okay, gotcha. So the same thing as before. All right, and then the other part says, you know, process turns a transmission corridor into a sustainable, diverse habitat of low-growing plant community dominated by grasses, ferns, flowers, and small shrubs. Again, just to reiterate, this is, you know, not something that we are really truly in opposition to, but it's not something that's happened in the past. And we're not getting a high level of confidence that you guys are really going to come back and make sure that this is what happens versus the absolute mess that we have in our neighborhood right now from just the small bit of last year's cutting. Disgusting tree of heaven, invasives. I mean, it's just a mess. I won't get into it, but I think you can imagine what it looks like because you've seen it. It's getting worse by the day. I have a question. Can the homeowners have compatible trees pre-ID'd within this easement zone, buffer zone? Because again, we know it's a lot of tall canopy forest, but if there is maybe by chance one of those compatible species that exists there, can it be flagged? Because we, you know, even though we're saying we're going to leave them, we really feel like there's going to be none. So how would that process work if we have someone come out, walk the area and say, actually, there is one little something that we can leave?
Yep, we can provide that if the property owner is interested.
Okay, so we'll contact you guys or Jim?
Jim,
Jim,
he'll-
okay, that
he'll
sounds
arrange
good.
it.
All right, okay, next page. Okay, it lists, you know, the distance here, it's just under 3 miles. Approximately how many trees is this?
I don't know.
Okay, well, we had loggers out in a, you know, a contract company looking to do the logging out in our neighborhood, and they were actually assessing the total number of trees. So we would just love to have that data.
We don't count trees though.
Okay, well, your contractor does.
No, they don't.
Well, that's what they told us they were doing. They were counting the trees, doing an estimate of total numbers and total value from the logging value of our trees.
I'm not aware that they did that.
Well, they did. Next page. Okay, this I just want to make sure it's accurate because, first of all, Durham Road Route 77, that's Guilford, it should be changed to a 79. That's what goes up through Madison. And also, if you go, there's an online, I don't know what you call it, it's a service where you can see all the abutters. It's kind of in a lifetime interactive website thing. What's it?
GIS mapping system.
Yeah, and there were other streets that came up, Pine Ridge, as well as additional addresses.
Yeah, we didn't list all the streets. These were.
Oh, these are just some of them,
Some
because
of
it says crossings and abutments, but this is just some of them. Okay, yeah, because we have more. Okay, so we should update that. And then the last piece was, we already talked about it, being contacted early. We were really only notified the end of May. It's been May, June, July, not even 3 months yet. And, we'd like some of these commitments to be provided in writing. We would like this to be up to date. This is really what's sent to media because we've seen it in publications and it's really misleading. It really doesn't, depict exactly what's going to be happening to our rights of way in these areas. My last comment is, yes, we really appreciate all the efforts that you guys have gone through. We just want to have questions answered with valid answers. We want to have things that are backed up with data. We don't want to be misled. We don't want to be dealing with inconsistencies. I feel like we're being stonewalled on a lot of cases with this. These are our properties. They mean a lot to us. We're going to be permanently dealing with alterations that will really never recover with what we have now. We could be looking up to, significant numbers. We have talked to real estate agents and they're like, yes, if this is gone, you can kiss 25% of your real estate value goodbye, no matter what, little scrubs, regrow. That's significant. And some people are even in a situation of more if they have a clear view of a substation and get the noise and all that other stuff. While we appreciate all of this, we're going to keep at it. Like I said, we're at the federal level now, and we want answers, we want changes, we want compromise that makes sense for residential areas. If you're going through an area that's, land trust or just general woods where no one lives, that's a different situation when you're cutting right through neighborhoods. You're going right near people's homes. You're going across their personal properties, which, they've maintained. My fruit trees are going to go because, supposedly they're going to get taller than 15 feet. And that's not okay. And like the total top line there says, Eversource is committed to being a good neighbor while conducting vegetation management programs. We want to believe that. We have not seen the actions to back that up. So hopefully from, you've gotten that message tonight. It's been a couple hours of same idea. We want to see significant changes and what's going on with this project from here on forward. So that's kind of my comment, and thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for coming out because, this is obviously an issue and I do want to say that, your willingness to come and answer questions as much as you can is appreciated. And we'll just make sure that things are followed through. And I think, you understand that people are still very passionate about this and we're going to continue to try and see if we can get some accommodations made to address some of their concerns. So thank you, and we'll update the website as soon as we can, okay?
Thanks, Peggy.